Looking back, it's hard to believe that we've rebuilt our community from the ground up with our own hands. The first seeds were planted way back in the terror and tenderness of the pandemic. And then change bloomed in the streets, in the fire and struggle of the uprisings. Around here, we'll never forget the day that the last prisoners were released, walking out into the arms of their loved ones. The easy part was finding work. The Community Care Corps was always looking for people in those days, whether for universal family care, burying border walls, or green new public housing, going up one pod at a time. Yep, it was a good time for busy hands.
Funny, thinking back to the first wave of the pandemic, that's what you really remember. Hands. Washing, scrubbing, disinfecting, washing again. Picturing each other's hands, all the hands that had touched whatever we were touching. The hands that packed the box, that picked the tomato, that planted the seed. The hands that stroked the brow, that said goodbye. The hands were us. All of us. That web of hand-to-hand, breath-to-breath relationships was a reminder. We are all entangled, making each other sick, keeping each other alive. That was just one of the lessons of COVID-19. It started in the first great pause, when the smog cleared and the rich fled the cities, when poverty dropped its disguise and racist inequality drew the map of the disease. As the roar of the traffic faded, we arose to birdsong and ambulance sirens. The virus showed us what was truly essential. And we learned again and again that so many of us doing essential work were being treated as sacrificial. From nursing homes to detention facilities, meatpacking plants and fulfillment centers, the virus exposed the cruelty of these warehouses of efficiency and profit. Then, things got worse. In 2023, super droughts led to mega floods. Locusts carved a path across continents and hyper typhoons drove millions from their homes. COVID-23 raced through storm shelters and refugee camps. Supplies ran out again. Meanwhile, dinosaurs roamed the halls of power, bellowing that more sacrifice was needed. But every time they cranked up that rusty old machine called economic growth, the cloud of sickness and death grew.
And we couldn't breathe. Couldn't breathe from the asthma in our polluted communities, from the smoke of those fires. We couldn't breathe with a knee on our necks, in the clouds of tear gas as we shouted, "Black Lives Matter." And that is how the virus changed everything. We finally understood that we couldn't keep patching up the same broken systems. We had to build something new. What was needed was a spark. That spark was us. After months of organizing, the viral rent strike was like a starting gun. Then came the essential workers' strike. Delivery drivers, street cleaners, and farm workers got together and said, "Enough." This time, people didn't just clap from their balconies. We flooded into the streets to join together. One of the leaders was Luciela, a young food courier. When a police bullet stole her life, the crowds exploded in size and then exploded again, spreading across borders like a counter-virus. The sparks look different in every country as the wildfire strikes leapt across borders. Economies ground to a halt, this time blockaded by workers. We lost too many young heroes as states brought out the iron fist, but it was no match for the raised fist of solidarity. Soon, authoritarian rulers started to topple like statues. and new governments were suddenly nervous about ignoring the streets. We joined hands and pushed further, launching the years of repair.
The first step was rebuilding the economy around the core of essential work: food and farming, care for young and old, public health. Not to mention the essential labour of the more than human world, the winged pollinators, the leafy oxygen makers. The Full Employment Act made the new priorities clear, and there was a wave of new worker cooperatives in everything from mental health support to public art and tree planting. Many bosses were made redundant. Our information ecology needed tending too, and so we built a digital commons, vaccinated it against surveillance, and built up our herd immunity to disinformation. Fossil fuels were running on fumes by that point, so we harnessed their final profits to clean up their messes. Whatever we could, we did outdoors. School, theatre, celebrating. At first because it was safer, then because we realised it made us happier. Nobody talked about missing shopping. Anyway, the right to repair movement meant that a lot of stuff got fixed rather than thrown away and replaced. With life moving at a slower pace, we finally had time to look back. And we began the most important repair of all: repairing relationships. In colonial countries like the US, Canada, Australia, and the UK, those were hard conversations. But truth and reparations commissions helped some of us face the truth about the violent conquests of the past and how they shaped our world. That guided where we repaired and how. It turned out that once we fully funded schools and housing and healthcare, we didn't need those bloated budgets for policing, prisons, and war. And ultimately, the flow of money on planet Earth had to be reversed. So the North finally started paying its debts, and the South finally stopped.
Around here, the Land Back program began the historic process of returning some of the stolen land to indigenous jurisdiction. In the process, we remembered how taking care of the earth lays the ground for taking care of each other. Within just a few years, we could see the bottom of the river again, and it was safe to drink and fish in its waters. Things aren't perfect, of course. Between mutating viruses and our warming world, there's always new storms headed our way. But when they come, we're ready. With our networks of nurses and neighbors, our small farms and big forests, our systems of care and repair. No one is sacrificed. Everyone is essential.